The Compromise of 1790, the deal that built D.C. What if I told you that the very location of the United States Capitol, Washington, D.C., wasn't the result of careful planning or democratic debate, but rather a secret political deal made over dinner? It might sound like the plot of a political thriller, but it's true. The Compromise of 1790 is one of the most fascinating and perhaps underrated turning points in early American history. It was a moment where bitter rivals came together, not out of friendship, but necessity, driven by the intense financial and political pressures of a newly independent nation struggling to survive. In the early 1790s, just a few years after the Revolutionary War, the fledgling United States was deep in financial trouble. The war had been costly. States like Massachusetts and New York were buried in debt. Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Secretary of the Treasury, proposed a bold solution. The federal government should assume all state debts from the war. This plan would not only stabilize national credit, but also bind the states more tightly under federal authority, giving the central government much-needed power and legitimacy. Hamilton believed this was the only way to earn the trust of international creditors and to build a unified national economy. But the idea wasn't popular everywhere. Many southern states, like Virginia and South Carolina, had already paid off most of their war debts. They saw Hamilton's plan as an unfair burden, essentially asking them to bail out the North. James Madison, a powerful Southern politician from Virginia, led the opposition in Congress, arguing that this plan would consolidate too much power in the federal government at the expense of the states. The debate became deadlocked. The nation, barely a decade into its existence, found itself once again teetering on the edge of disunity. And then something unexpected happened. Behind closed doors, in a quiet room at Thomas Jefferson's New York City residence, while it was still the temporary capital of the country, a private dinner took place. There, Jefferson, Hamilton, and Madison struck a deal that would alter the course of American history. In what came to be known as the dinner table bargain, Hamilton agreed to support the relocation of the national capital to a site along the Potomac River, closer to the south. In return, Madison and Jefferson would allow Hamilton's financial plan to pass in Congress. It was a masterclass in political negotiation. Each side gave up something and gained something in return. For Hamilton, the assumption of state debts passed, strengthening the federal government and ensuring financial stability. For the South, the promise of a capital city in their backyard brought influence and prestige. It was a moment of compromise that highlighted the complex balancing act required to keep the United States from splintering apart in its infancy. This agreement was formalized with the passing of the Residence Act of 1790. The law authorized President George Washington to choose the exact location for the new capital. Washington, a Virginian himself, selected a site along the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia. It was a swampy, undeveloped tract of land, far from the thriving cities of the North, but full of symbolic potential. The new capital would not belong to any one state, but would be carved out as a federal district, independent of local government control. Surveyors, including African-American astronomer and mathematician Benjamin Banneker, began the challenging task of mapping the area. Architect Pierre-Charles L'Enfant was hired to design the city itself, envisioning wide boulevards, ceremonial spaces, and a grand layout befitting a republic. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The area was notorious for its oppressive summer heat, its mosquito-ridden marshes, and the sheer difficulty of transforming wild land into a functional capital. Landowners in the area were pressured to sell or donate land, and many local residents were displaced. Enslaved labor would be used in the construction of the new federal buildings, an early stain on the city's democratic ideals. Despite these challenges, the construction of Washington, D.C. slowly progressed. Today, when we walk past the White House, gaze at the Capitol Dome, or stroll along the National Mall, we are witnessing the living result of that compromise. Washington, D.C. stands not just as the seat of government, but as a symbol of the complex, sometimes messy, but necessary art of political negotiation. It's a reminder that even in our most divided moments, progress is still possible if we're willing to meet at the table.